down over 50% on their Bitcoin investment.
Yeah, but
If you
bro,
watch a lot of the things
Jaime,
in El
Jaime
Salvador,
Garcia. Jaime Garcia is here.
listen.
We should.
if
I'm gonna try and
if I
invite him up
if
here.
I could
He's an
finish
Bring him
expert
real
up.
if I
on
could finish
this
real quick,
sort of thing.
if I could
Oh,
finish
sorry.
real
Go ahead.
quick, Lightning Network is still too expensive for people in third world countries. The fees. I'm not sure if you can settle payments
Not true. That's
offline.
a false statement.
Okay, well, I mean, I can
You
send
could.
a Lightning Network payment right now. $10 is it's still gonna cost me 7 to 25 cents. I mean,
True.
that's kind of expensive as far as payments goes. Um, Bitcoin has
Brandon,
been
you just sandbagging, bro?
Hey, Hexkins.
Bitcoin has been tracked from every exchange.
I'm
Anywhere
in
you
Twitter
send
Spaces
Bitcoin, it's
again.
being tracked. It's a company, if you all want to look it up, it's called Chainalysis. They've been tracking it's
Bro, come
basically every.
on, come
Do you want me to
on.
share it?
I just can't. I can't deal with this.
This
I
space
can't
was
deal with
called
this
See, I
shit.
don't know what's up
like
with
market
Bitcoin.
updates or
Chainalysis,
something
bro.
like
Are
that
you fucking kidding me?
prior
I
to
don't know
Chainalysis. You
what's
it
up
just
with
being
bring
you
renamed
all.
Bitcoin
Like,
I took him
Happy
off the
Hour.
stage. He's got the XRP in his
Oh
handle.
God.
Jaime, you're
Sorry.
the sort of resident El Salvador expert.
Quite a
If you
few
wanna-
people
if
have
you want
come
to take
into
that,
the
great. Maybe you
space
could just give like a brief update on El Salvador's
and been
status over
just
there. I think a lot of
freaking
people want to know
idiots.
about that anyway. So all yours.
One person
Yeah,
was
sure,
talking
sure. I mean,
about being
I was
scammed
kind of wanting to ask his question, but
and
he couldn't land the plane, so I'll just
attaching
move on.
to a movie star
Yeah,
and
I mean,
acting like
in
it
El
was something that
Salvador, like if we're at
they
the
interacted
Human
with
Rights
a movie
Foundation
star's a
space
scammer.
earlier on,
It's
like I guess
retarded.
what's new according to
Does that
them
give
is that
you
Bukele
clout or
is the
something?
worst
Doesn't
dictator
matter.
in the history of the galaxy. The reality is that the man's
Another
got
person was saying that
a country
somebody
to run
had
that has had
a fake job or not a real
decades
job
of
because they were
corrupt
making stuff with a 3D printer
and
and
very
selling it.
deep structural
And they were saying that they did
damaged
15 trades yesterday and
institutions.
made $500,
And so
and
what may
therefore
seem to us, and I
they've
know
got a real
a lot of
job
us
or
are,
something. I don't know.
in the kind of vein
Fucking
of
retarded.
libertarianism,
But
what may
luckily they
seem
got
to
removed.
us as infringements upon people's rights is actually ensuring the security of the majority of Salvadorans because they don't
So I
they
had
just can't
gotten
walk down the street up
the
until
microphone
recently because
while I
they
was in
would
my
just get the
car,
shakedown, right? So
and
I mean,
I started getting
say
rugged
this
basically,
because
so I just went ahead and rugged
everything
myself
gets linked to
and
Bitcoin
restarted.
in El
So I've got a
Salvador.
request to get a microphone right
Couple
now.
things have happened, and just to address some
We're
of
at a little bit of a
what
delay
that other
because
guy
it's
was
streaming,
saying is like, look, El Salvador
but I'm
does make
hoping to introduce these
purchases
people to Richard
on
Hart
Bitcoin, and it
and
deals
his
with a couple
lessons.
of factors.
Because earlier they were
The
talking
first
about
one
owning
is
your own
they're
keys.
actually putting Bitcoin away as for the country's treasury as reserves. But the other one is that they, by law, the Bitcoin law, they have to keep this escrow to ensure the auto conversion. As per the law, every citizen who downloads the government wallet can accept Bitcoin, but then the government has to provide the mechanism for auto conversion. So that escrow behind it all to make sure that volatility really is taken away, especially from the more economically vulnerable people in El Salvador. They have to keep replenishing that, and so every buy that they make is to basically replenish whatever loss they have. They also have some gains, by the way, and but in addition to that, they also have to make purchases because every day there's new uh, uh, users to the platform, to the Chivo platform. Like somebody turns 18 every day, and they get that $30 bonus, right? And that $30 bonus is not actual USD, but it's the equivalent of the price in Bitcoin on that day or in that moment, right? So that those just I think that there's a lot of misinformation and just unclear information about why that is. But lastly, I would say that, like, if and we all know this, you don't lose it if you don't sell, right? You don't buy the top and sell the bottom. Like that's not what they're doing. In fact, Minister Alejandro Zelaya, Minister of Finance Alejandro Zelaya. He's a very smart man. I've watched some Spanish interviews with the guy. Like
Finbear in the house.
I mean, I'm convinced that if he was in charge of a G20 economy, he would have it. He would have it firing on all cylinders. One of the things that I think is very clever right now is that they're actually buying back their bond obligations to whoever wants to sell it at the current market price. They're getting it at a discount right now, before they mature on the 2023 2025. I know there's been a lot of FUD about them defaulting.
Jaime, I
So-
want to jump. Sorry to interrupt you. I want to jump in here. Where do you know where they're getting the money to buy back their bonds from, or like where is this money coming from?
That's a really good question. That's because that's what everybody's saying. It's like, well, where is the money coming from? Okay, yeah. What you have to understand is that, like, now that he has a supermajority in the assembly, as well as he's got the executive, they can align the budgets, and there's less negotiation. What used to happen before is that, like, when they didn't have a Congress that would kind of like work with them, they would be like, well, we'll actually approve this budget, but we need this, like pork barrel spending kind of bullshit, right? So there's less of that, first of all.
This guy's
okay?
talking about El Salvador.
The other thing is that, like, their economic agenda is very much aligned, and they've so they tell us. I mean, I'm skeptical too, right? Like, I'm not gonna like shill for the guy or the government, but what they tell us is like, look, there was all kinds of backroom deals, like money going missing. We take out these loans. By the way, the bond obligations that they're paying for these two 2023 and 2025 coming up, they were taken out in 2002, and all that money is gone. and embezzled money laundering, all of a sudden ministers that
But
had
do you
no
not
money.
think it? Do you not think it's weird that like Bukele brags about buying the dip and he's bought 500 Bitcoin or whatever the amount is, something like he's bought 80 million US dollars of Bitcoin, and then he's about to pay back, like, the 2023 bond is 800 million, 900 million.
Yeah,
If he's
800
so
million.
bullish, if he's so bullish on Bitcoin, he's only bought 80 million of Bitcoin, or whatever it is that he's bought.
It's a drop in the bucket. I mean, like,
It's
when you
nothing
think
compared to how much he's about to pay back on the bond.
yeah,
Guys,
exactly.
El Salvador has $3.5 billion in reserve assets.
Yeah,
So
exactly.
money you put into Bitcoin, whatever money you put in Bitcoin was a marketing gimmick, and it's worked. Hey
Yeah,
guys,
exactly.
It's paid off.
If he wanted to do something legitimate for his people, and he may, is he would set up a facility, a mechanism for them to turn their fiat currency into Bitcoin without getting raped and pillaged. The problem is if
that
he goes
exists
too
already
far.
for places. That
Yeah,
exists.
he's done
great.
that. He's done that.
That's what these people need. But the problem that you have there, which again, I don't know how it works and who, what, where, when, is how the hell if that genie comes out of the bottle and it gets big legs, how do they collect taxes, right? So anyhow,
Okay.
before you answer that, so I had somebody show me this on a space. He said, download this thing. I downloaded it. He says, give me your QR code. He sent me like a penny's worth of Bitcoin or whatever it was. This, I think, is free, this Blue Wallet thing here in the Nest. Take a look in the Nest. Sorry. But yeah, let's just say Bitcoin does get legs and it gets mass adoption in an El Salvador or one of these places. And this president bought it and marketing, and look, he's done a fabulous job. I mean, he's done a better job marketing El Salvador, even if he loses the whole 80 million, than a California or a Florida or one of these places has done marketing their states and their travel and tourism budgets. I'm pretty sure a hell of a lot more than 80 million. So even if he lost everything, but let's just say that it does catch mass traction, and now 60, 70, 80% of the transactions in there are all Bitcoin. How do they, and it's all, off the grid, so to speak. How does the country collect taxes? It's now in a place to where the country doesn't know what the hell's going on.
Yeah,
How do taxes work?
Yeah, so part of, and this is how they're getting their money back, right? Like, I mean, what you have to understand is El Salvador is not unlike any other Latin American country where there is, very few oligarch families controlling most of, the businesses in the country, right? And so what happens is that usually a government that is friendly to those family comes in, and they collect taxes on the general population, but they completely ignore the source of the real money where it's from, right? So now what Bukele has done is, like, when he came in, he said, we're not going to bring any taxes in, like, but what we are going to do is enforce, because they had like millions upon millions of dollars of like unenforced arrear taxes for various different organizations. As soon as he started doing that, some of them went bankrupt, all of this stuff. But he's been quite successful in collecting a lot of these taxes, and so it's they brought in a law like just like a fiscal accountability law, in terms of like, and they have people like on payment programs even, so they're making it easier for people to, because they realize they can't collect all this money from everybody. But that's one of the areas where they're collecting taxes. Now, El Salvador is not a high taxing jurisdiction. They have some form of corporate taxes. They have some form of like sales taxes, but taxes are very low, and so they're just being efficient that way. And they're just being efficient in how they're spending a lot of the money. I mean, there's a lot of money going missing, and right now, I mean, there might be. I'm not saying like that. The other thing we have to understand is that there's political corruption, and then there's also institutional corruption, right? Like, your higher level bureaucrats may be in on something, and they haven't identified it, but they, they've been successful in like shutting down all the all these valves where a lot of money was missing. And so but yeah, I mean, the other thing you have to understand is, like, exports have gone up by 13% in the last in over the last year. The GDP, like, spending has gone up, tourism has gone up. There's one of the few jurisdictions in Latin America who's actually faring quite well through these inflationary times. There are some subsidies that they're applying to like gas and stuff, but the other big thing is this whole crime spree. There was about $65 million that was being sucked away from the economy, just just by people getting shaken down. Now that money can circulate around the economy without fear of, like, because what they used to do is pay rent. Like, it's like, if I lived in my neighborhood, just to be in my neighborhood, I'd have like one of the gangsters come by and say, be like, okay, it's time to pay rent. And that was the form of tax collection there, that the government actually had no way of enforcing, but criminal organizations were enforcing, right? Putting these guys in jail, yeah, although there's a cost to that, has liberated a bunch of this for just the average person, right? So there's no magic wand there, I think, but and it's, yeah, like, adoption is going to be a slug. It's but we got to be patient, and I think, like, overall things are going better than I expected, but who knows? Like, it's there's a lot of fun. Like, there's certainly, I'm skeptical either way. Like, I'm not saying like this is success, but it's way better than I thought.
Yeah. All right. Let's go to a few hands.
Yeah.
Isaac, what do you got, brother?
Hey guys, can you hear me? Yep, we got you. Go for it. Great. So I actually raised my hand. I was jogging. I raised my hand a while ago. Geez, I don't know how long, but so quick background. I'm pretty familiar with crypto. I've used it a bunch, various kinds, and as I was trading different altcoins, I'd always put back into the into Bitcoin as a central basket. So I could advocate for the Bitcoin story. But I guess a question came up that I don't really have a great answer to. 3 Aces asked when I raised my hand, I don't know how long ago. And I mean, and respectfully, guys, I like, there's such an edge of like proselytizing and evangelism in the room that I just like hope there could be a little bit of spaciousness around the question, because there really wasn't earlier. And it's a simple question, and I'd love to game it out. And I don't know if there's the time or the space for that. But when 3 Aces asked, well, what about the fact that, you know, there's only so like, right, like what happens if the majority of Bitcoin ends up in only a few wallets? Or he was framing it more eloquently than me, but the central question was sort of around general custody of the Bitcoins. And the instant answer that came just, you know, really swiftly and fiercely from various angles shut the question down, but without giving what I felt like an interesting answer. Just from the outside observer, guys, in the space here, I think that like as advocates of crypto, I understand or Bitcoin specifically, sorry. I understand that probably you're often having to defend it against people that are really naysayers, but like I feel like steel manning these arguments would be a really interesting way through, right? Which is where you really take on the critique and the perspective of the person asking a genuine question, trying to understand, and then actually like unpack and extrapolate that to see if there is, because for me, I'm super curious, like, and I don't know, but it just feels like if, you know, someone was saying it's almost as if it was like a foregone conclusion that Bitcoin will be $1 million. Well, if Bitcoin ultimately becomes $1 million and there's 21 million of them, so what is that, like a $21 trillion asset class? Is that how the zeros work? Well, in that case,
what would you do if the majority of US dollars were owned by the top 1%?
Well, this is exactly the point, right? I'd be deeply concerned and try to seek a different system, right? Because I would believe, so let me finish, because the very fact that the top 1% would own the majority of this currency would compel me to wish to create an alternate system. And so this is why I want.
And then how do you fairly distribute a currency such that, like, you know, you get your fair share? We're talking about like
that's not the question. Hold on, excuse me. That's not the question. So I never once suggest. No, it's not. I never suggested a fair share. What I suggested is, and again, when you guys earlier, your response to the question was getting into Pareto efficiency and 80-20 rules, which I think is a bit of a deflection, to be fair, because it may. I think it is, because that, without getting too into the weeds of the Pareto efficiencies, but the thing is, we're not gaming out what it would look like if Bitcoin was in fact in the hands, if this $21 trillion hypothetical asset was controlled by a certain class of people, and without gaming it out and considering it. So this, the response that's the natural way of things, and that 80-20 is how all things are, and therefore there's always inevitably going to be a distribution. That's a showstopper of the fun of the exploration. Question.
We can game it out, and we can like do a modeling where it, like, some percentage owns some percentage of the Bitcoin, but
my question is more like, how can they affect, like, what would it look like if these people, because currently, as you probably know, right, like Bitcoin whales heavily manipulate the price all the time.
No,
right?
I mean, that's just a
for the common trader.
That's a statement you're making, and then you're assuming it to be true.
No, it's my experience trading cryptocurrencies.
Your experience trading cryptocurrencies is that whales control the majority of trading.
Yeah, I mean, this is established, right? Like, this isn't like.
No, I'm just questioning.
I don't think that's established.
Isaac, so I think the reason that it becomes a better money, I think what Bitcoin does is it changes the definition of stability. Before Bitcoin existed, stability meant that you were shielded from volatility and you could retain your purchasing power as good as the next person. But what happened is, because of interest rate manipulation, it became pretty much untenable to keep those stable rates. That's why fiat is spiraling out of control. And so what they've redefined stability to is monetary issuance. It's predictable into the future. the fact that Bitcoin's not $1 million yet makes me really hopeful that we're not in a situation where the whales have all the Bitcoin.
Well, right, and I guess perhaps for me, I feel like we have a failure of imagination, because what we tend to do in these conversations is we imagine a future in which we paint Bitcoin in the best light, but then what we as a community tend to do, I believe, we fail to imagine the government response to that $21 trillion asset and what it might look like. By the way, if you guys have any like curiosity, I personally am connected into like a web of sort of like, you know, like I can turn cash into Bitcoin, so to speak. And I'll tell you, in large denominations, in order to utilize it in a way that is, you know, traceless, so to speak, or effectively traceless, and it's in the current state of things, and I understand that like a lot can change here, but even in the current state of, if I want to get $100,000 liquid cash Bitcoin, well, I have to be talking to certain unsavory characters, and I'm paying commissions that, you know, I'd rather not pay. And there is a barter layer trade going on peer to peer that sort of does and fulfills some of the other missions of Bitcoin, so to speak, right? Which is that it can be sort of like traceless and the government can't take it from us. But we're not even imagining what it would look like as a governmental response to a $21 trillion asset class, all the while imagining, and trust me, I'm an anarcho-libertarian, at least like philosophically, right? Like I deeply believe in the core premise of like the freedom we're seeking, and that like it's absolutely our lifeblood, currency and finance, and that like the way that it's being leached from the people is, you know, it's like I buy the Michael Saylor argument, let's just say. But my point is, are we really imagining the counterpoint systems of control that will be put into place by the major players? And are we even talking about that now? Or is this just simply the time where we have to sort of evangelize Bitcoin because there's so many naysayers?
I'm not convinced that there's a faction of people that don't want Bitcoin to exist that aren't just, you know, bank lobbies or like the blockbusters of the old generation. I'm pretty convinced that the smartest people in all the governments realize what's going on. I think we've seen it from a lot of politicians, and I think that the wave of what's happening, I don't think you can just assume that the government is not somehow intricately involved with the birth and like creation and growth of Bitcoin.
Oh no, I don't. Perhaps I misrepresented what I meant to say. Is it's not that I don't assume that they are, but it seems like we're speaking about the future of Bitcoin and the benefits that it brings, as if the government wasn't already, you know, wrapping the tentacles around. And so when I talk about what it means, it's not even whales. When I imagine a future in which this, you know, vision comes to life to a degree, it's not, you know, these ostensible whales that control and manipulate it. It's that I believe like central powers, the central governments will most likely own most of the Bitcoin anyways. And that in order to get on and off, on board and off board the ramps, just like now, and not be tracked and not be traced, you're going to have to enter into an illicit black market in order to do so, which, you know, again, I have personal experience with and can answer questions with respect to that. I mean, it's pretty straightforward. You know what I'm saying? So like,
we can't do anything about that if the government wants to make Bitcoin illegal or whatever. Bitcoin's going to be a black market.
Okay, so then I guess that's the black swan then, right? And that kind of messes everything up with our planning and visioning of, because, you know, I thought this was the heart of today's question. Maybe I misunderstood
but
it.
Bitcoin started not being within the legal framework, or even not even the legal framework. Bitcoin began without it being in the realm of like what is possible according to computer science and physics. And yet here we are. So
Zach, I'd be curious to hear what you think about this sort of like the dynamic between governments banning Bitcoin or really coming down with like a, you know, sort of iron hammer on the thing, and the admission of defeat as far as the strength of their own currency and their own policy making. That's one thing that's always interested me, is that if governments really decide that they want to ban Bitcoin outright, they can come up with whatever reason they want. But I think there's a sufficient lack of trust and institutional communication that governments banning Bitcoin would really only serve to strengthen it. And because of the peer-to-peer, like the available peer-to-peer nature of the network for people who want to transact in that currency, it's very difficult to control it. That's you know, it's something I've tried to flesh out. I'd be curious to hear your thoughts about it. Sounds like you've given it some thought too.
Well, yeah, thank you. I haven't given it as much thought. That's kind of what I was trying to bring to the hive mind here, but it's not so much governments banning sort of this binary system of thought. It's that like moving forward into the future of currency, I suspect the majority of it, if not all of it, is going to be central bank digital currency to some degree. And that Bitcoin will, as perhaps you guys, hopefully, right, Bitcoin will still be around. And in that case, it'll be another asset class. But just like Three Aces is describing the particularities of moving around gold and the benefits of gold as it integrates, as a store of value with the other currencies, moving, Bitcoin will potentially be yet another one of those currencies with certain strengths, right? Those strengths being this peer-to-peer. But I'm trying to figure out what makes it. And at that point, is it revolutionary? I mean, surely in a sense, it's an abstracted form of currency and store of value that exists. I mean, we all know the story and it's extraordinary, it's miraculous. But is it the sort of holy grail of our own freedoms, that is sort of feels embedded into the context of the conversation here? And I'm not sure I'm seeing that as I peer into the future. I see it as an incredible asset that's traded like digital gold.
Isaac, if I may, just to clarify, are you trying to say that like a CBDC is a competitor to Bitcoin?
Well, no, I'm trying to say that I suspect the future of the vast majority of money will be, I think central banks are going to shift into CBDCs, just like China's sort of leading the way. And apparently even in like rural farms and in the mountains, they're figuring out tech that allows these people to trade this, digital RMB, which is kind of incredible. But so it's not about competition. It's that one hypothetical future.
Been to China, or are you just reading the news on what Chinese people are doing with CBDC or not?
Can I ask the basis of that question? I'm confused. Would I have needed to be to China in order to report on my research, or just out of curiosity?
What's your research?
Have you been to China and seen otherwise?
I lived in Hong Kong and China for 25 years. Yes. So.
Okay. Well, yeah. So actually, it was a Bitcoin maxi. I forget his name, who was reporting on the CBDC project that they're rolling out. I could Google really.
That's fine. I'm asking you about your personal experience, not about what some BTC maxis said or didn't say.
Sir, with all due respect, it's this particular type of response. It's easy to shut down a conversation by saying if somebody has
asking you a question response.
No, I feel like I said something, and then instead of responding to what I said, we kind of pivoted it off of a tangent based upon, let's say, forget the CBDC
I wanted to make sure that I was on the same page as you. It seemed to me like you were saying that CBDCs are like a direct competitor to Bitcoin. I've heard that
again, but you asked me that, and I responded that was not. So okay, if we could just let that one kind of go by, but you would have to assume that I believe that Bitcoin is an inevitable currency that's going to be utilized globally to then ask the question, is it a direct competitor? And I'm not quite sure it is yet, as much as I'm enthralled by Jack Mallers' Lightning Network, and I was rooting him on as he was developing it, right? And I'm super into the Chivo wallet, and I'm fascinated by Bukele. As much as I'm on board with all that, the answer to the question about the CBDC was I think that's somewhat of an inevitability, and I don't know where Bitcoin is.
So Isaac, I have a question for you down that route. Then
you're just basically saying a bunch of words, solid Bukele, strike, Jack.
No, I was just trying to give you background so that you understand that I'm grounded in the conversation.
Isaac, why would anyone use a CBDC in the first place if they could just have dollars?
Well, look,
I believe moving forward we'll be compelled to. We'll be compelled to by the government.
Only if you're getting.
I personally think if there is a central bank digital currency, that the price of gold and silver double, and so does the price of Bitcoin. I am not participating in anything like that.
Yeah, but
I don't know about you.
Three Aces, that people will use CBDCs, right? They will. I think
businesses and banks, right. But myself personally, I would never touch anything like that.
Agreed.
I mean, I'm not advocating it by any means.
CBDCs are going to drive a lot of adoption to any form of value. I won't call it a currency or money because we can get into the difference between those things, but any form of value exchange where it allows two people to say this is what something's worth, here's what I'm willing to give you for it. All those non-state or anything that separates government from money, all those things they're going to go up in value when a CBDC gets introduced, because there's going to be a bunch of people that realize the downsides to CBDCs.
I fully agree. I feel like in this future world of tyranny that I'm projecting as a creative exercise, just like we're projecting, $1 million Bitcoins and game playing stuff, I absolutely agree that Bitcoin will be massively more valuable. That was actually the response that I was trying to say. What Bitcoin's place be in a world of CBDC? Well, I think it would be another type of gold, But again, in that world, I do believe that the government would have its tentacles wrapped a lot tighter around the whole situation. And yeah, I am concerned about the state of things. I look at what happened in Canada. I look at what they did to these people's money. And I think that was just a taste of what it is that we're going to be seeing.
Yeah,
I'm going
to get off here, but I just find these type of conversations not that interesting, simply because of this. I don't even deal with cash. The government knows where I spend everything. And so in reality, we're already living under a CBDC regime. So whether they introduce the technology or not, it's almost inconsequential. The only way to get
except
out
they'll
of
be able to
is
shut off
Bitcoin. That's the only way.
Well, I mean, like
Zach,
in Canada,
Zach, have you considered? Sorry, Green Candle. Zach, have you read? So you're talking about this thought experiment where governments kind of clamp down as things get more free and the availability of these tools becomes more widespread. Governments clamp down on quote unquote freedom. You've obviously read Sovereign Individual, I hope?
I have, yeah.
Yeah, so this is like a pretty standard set of thought experiments, right? Like what happens when people become too free for the government's preferences? It seems to me like I would tend to agree with the two authors of Sovereign that the more this stuff becomes available, the more they will crack down, and the admission of defeat will become more evident to everyone who's paying attention. And the people who aren't paying attention are too far gone to matter to the sort of next generation of citizenship, whatever that means anyway. I'd be curious to hear your thoughts and everyone else's thoughts on that.
Could you repeat it, bro? I'm sorry, that specifically.
Yeah, just that as the Sovereign Individual kind of makes this case that the more people have tools of freedom available to them, whether it's money or working abroad, things of that nature, stuff that COVID accelerated, to be honest. The more that governments will crack down on these things, and the more that governments, much like I said earlier, as far as like banning Bitcoin or something of that nature, the more that governments crack down on these freedom tools, the more they're admitting defeat, and the more people will realize that it's important to allocate to these things, whether it's with their time or their money. Has everyone given that kind of thing enough thought? To me, it feels like that's the best case for Bitcoin. It may not be a store of value for some, may not be, as Three Aces, as was saying earlier when we were talking about, it's a different thing for different people. It may not be everything to everyone right now, but at some point, it's going to be something for everybody as governments crack down. I think that's fair to say, no?
I don't think the governments are going to crack down because they're going to get the taxes from you when you get the Bitcoin goes up. But having said that, look what happened to NFTs. I mean, that's not going where everybody thought it was going, right?
Nothing is going to get you booted faster a second time than talking about NFTs when we're talking about sovereign individuals. Anyway, sorry, Zach, go ahead.
So I have a question, right?
Sure.
I have a question on this topic, right? Like, I kind of think this government banning Bitcoin is like a hypothetical question. So I want to flip it, right? What NYDIG is doing, right? Like, we're seeing retail banks that are adding Bitcoin, right? Like, where, the average person at their retail bank is going to be able to buy and hold Bitcoin at retail banks, right? And this is through NYDIG, right? Like, they're one of the big companies that are helping retail banks implement and hold Bitcoin for the average person. So that is happening now, right? That's not a hypothetical. That's happening now. So Bitcoin is all over CNBC, Bloomberg, right? Like, it's right there near the major indices. When you watch TV, like, I think a large majority of people know what Bitcoin is, and it is becoming a legitimate asset, right? That's why retail banks are trying to allow the average person to buy and hold Bitcoin in their standard retail bank, their retail bank. So if we continue to see this trend get stronger and stronger, where we have legitimate retail banks, institutions integrating Bitcoin into their ecosystem, how is the government going to ban it. Like, from my perspective, it's like, it doesn't seem like Bitcoin is going to be banned because, like, it's becoming legitimate. It is legitimate.
Well, if I could just real quick on that point, I think it's important to understand what we're talking about here. Fundamentally, Bitcoin is just communication. It's speech. It's sending a message from point A to point B, right? And like our Constitution protects that. So you can't really ban, like you can't ban the thing without a much larger legal rigmarole. But you certainly can cut off on into fiat, right? Like it's well within any sovereign's ability and right to say what can and can't be traded for their printed currency on centralized regulated exchanges, right? So I think it's a totally feasible thing to say, well, what if US gets tired of this and wants to say, cool, like it is illegal to convert US dollars into Bitcoin on any regulated centralized exchange. Illegal, right? They could do that. But you look into the past, the prohibition, anything else. What happens to the value of the thing when restricted? Right. So there's lots of things to talk about here, but I don't think just outright like banning Bitcoin on its face is feasible. It's just speech. Like we've had this conversation. Cypherpunks before us had this fight. It's protected. It would take a lot to ban Bitcoin.
I'm going to take my exit, guys. I really appreciate the time and thank you for allowing me to share. And the real quick riff on the question that you answered, and it's just that I'm pretty terrified of what's happening in the government right now, and it was regulated from sort of like a very bizarre places and spaces. And I appreciate the optimism and the hope that everyone has, but I'm definitely worried and concerned with the way that our society is going and what we're watching, what's happening in Ukraine, China, all over the world. But anyways, thank you so much for your time. And take care.
Isaac, before you go.
Yes, sir.
Just so you know, I share your sentiment about the proselytizing. It seems like a lot of this is, when we get to heaven, everything will be okay. I'm with you on that. And just so you know, total respect, and you brought up a lot of good points, and thank you for speaking.
Yeah, absolutely, man. And if at some point too, if we could get to that thing where we actually think about what are the real downsides of if a lot of these powers control most of the Bitcoin, what does that mean for Bitcoin? That's still the question I'm left with.
It means nothing, Isaac. It means nothing. Bitcoin, it means nothing because you don't control the network when you own Bitcoin. So it means absolutely nothing. In answer to 3 Aces' comment earlier about his $500 million worth of gold that he stores in his private corporation, which is based outside of the United States, you can do exactly the same thing with Bitcoin. You could set up a business, you could set up a corporation, you could earn money in Bitcoin and do exactly what you're doing with your gold. It'd be quite easy. And by the way, something that people don't understand, the more Bitcoin gets adopted, the more users using Bitcoin, it becomes nearly impossible to trace. When you have circular economies, it becomes nearly impossible to trace. And this is something that's very poorly understood. It's still a very small asset. But as it grows in the coming decade or two, you will find the ability to do what you're doing in gold even easier to do with Bitcoin. And it's far more secure, and it's far easier to control it globally than what you're doing with gold. So it's just you're not having a really deep understanding of Bitcoin, which gives you blinders as to the comparisons you make between gold and Bitcoin. And so it's really just an absence of information.
Well, I think too, Tina, a lot of folks consider Bitcoin in one of two frames of view, right? It's Bitcoin in USD terms, or it's Bitcoin in Bitcoin terms.
Oh, did he leave? Did
right?
Aces leave? He didn't hear this? Is he gone?
Yeah, he's
specifically
gone.
directed to 3 Aces.
I know.
If he's not here.
No, he bounced out. But I think you make a good point.
No,
a lot of folks look at Bitcoin in USD terms, right? Price.
Yeah, I know. But I was specifically addressing what he's looking to do with his gold. You can do it just as easily with Bitcoin, exactly the same way you're doing it.
Yeah, but you guys got to realize that he's on a different timeline than y'all are. Like, he's an older guy. He's on a completely different timeline. Like, his time horizon is completely different. And there's no reason for him to adopt it.
By the way, by the way, there is a reason for him to adopt it, because whether he understands this or not, Bitcoin is going to eat gold's lunch, and Bitcoin will demonetize gold. In 20 years, gold will be a pretty much worthless asset. No one will want to have it. No one will want to use it. And the uses to which he thinks he can put gold are, there's nothing that Bitcoin can't do much better, particularly as it grows larger and you have circular economies. His understanding will cost him dearly in the future, but I don't really mind that. I'm good with that.
Can I just say, Tina, for all the newbies out here, your series with CK Snarks from Bitcoin Magazine, I think it's the original, like, 2 or 3 part podcast.
Yeah, it's 4 parts. Four parts.
4 parts.
Yes.
People should go back and listen to that. It's from 2020. They should listen to it. It is fucking incredible. It blew my mind. I listened to it like 1 or 2 years later. Amazing. You're one of my heroes.
I'm not a hero. I think I have an understanding of this. I think I understand it better than many other people around the world, which right now is not that hard to do. And people will come to understand it. And it's a huge advantage. It's a huge edge. Bitcoin is insanely cheap at this point. That doesn't mean it won't get cheaper. It's unclear what this bear market looks like in stocks. If there's a severe bear market in stocks, Bitcoin is not going to fight against that. But if you don't own it, you're making a big mistake. You need to start buying it now. It's very cheap. I still have a very big position on a percentage basis.
I remember Odell calling you a bear in like peak bull market 2021. And
I know. I wish I was. I wish I sold.
Bro, you were. No, I think compared.
I
to
wish
him,
I
you
was
were a
actually
bear.
bearish.
No, I think you were compared to he was like calling for 300K, and like you were maybe being a bit more sensible, and so you were called a bear. And I think you're. Oh, by the way, I love you, Odell.
So do I. I love Matt also. I know Matt. I love Matt.
We don't know. Me too. And we don't. I'm just speaking to the general crowd here, not directly to you, because we don't know who's here and who might interpret whatever, how. Tina's friends with Odell. I love Matt Odell, and so Odell actually described it perfectly. As like we were all drunk or high on the bull market.
I don't know. From that, I got that Gandalf wants to fight Odell. So this is being recorded, so we'll see a fit fight, or maybe we'll get Joey to try to get you guys to go to some 40-yard dash or something like that.
Tina, are you coming? It's Tina, are you coming to BitBlock Boom?
I am not.
Tina, when do I get to meet you in person?
At some point, God willing.
I hope so.
All right, we got.
What are we doing here? Are we signing off or are we continuing?
We'll do one last hand and then we'll sign off.
I gotta hop. Take care, guys.
Hey, I'd like to paint a picture.
Peace, Tina.
There was once a Bitcoin maxi, and he really wanted Bitcoin to survive, but he saw there being a little bit of a problem with people trying to grow their Bitcoin, so grow the value in their account. So maybe they go over to an exchange, and
it's about Hex.
This is where people would trade back and forth in order to increase their Bitcoins. But who really wins? Like sometimes the leader is the winner, but the exchange is often the winner. So how is it that you can grow your Bitcoin without putting it into the exchange or trading on the exchange? Maybe you trust it with a third party who says that they're going to do something with it.
How do you grow your Hex without sucking Richard Hart's dick?
All right.
So Bitcoin
That's
is
inappropriate.
Bitcoin is
Knock that guy down.
deflationary. So Bitcoin is deflationary, or more accurately said, it's disinflationary. And what that means is you don't have to grow your Bitcoin. Your Bitcoin becomes more valuable over time. So this entire concept of trying to get a yield, that just comes from the broken fiat system. And it's a little hard for us who have been so indoctrinated into that system to shake that belief. But once you understand the power of deflation, you really see that there is no need to try to grow your Bitcoin other than simply just working for it.
Yep, exactly. And on that note, I do these spaces every Friday starting at 4:30 p.m. Eastern time, and then go until we're done ripping. And I am a little worn out, so I am done for right now. So give everybody that was speaking, Gandalf, Jaime, Joey, D++, give them all a follow. If you want to come back.
I'll just say D++ gave the best ever explanation for newbies about what Bitcoin mining is. If you Google her name and Unconfiscatable, D++ Unconfiscatable, go watch her chat at Unconfiscatable about what Bitcoin mining is. It's the greatest explanation I've ever heard about Bitcoin mining.
Oh, Gandalf, love you. It sounds like you're coming to BitBlock Boom, so it sounds like we're going to party again.
Yes.
Yay.
We got a Simpcoin Gandalf up here, simping for D++ and Tina. So I've had enough. I've had enough of the simping Gandalf. I'm signing off. Give me a follow if you guys want to come back and get the reminder. And listen to the Canadian Bitcoiners podcast, State of Bitcoin, Gandalf stuff. Everybody. All right. Thank you so much for coming out. See y'all next week.
Damn, I bombed that, huh? Shoot. Yeah, they're just being silly. It would be nice to go and hit them in the throat, but they are people that are stuck in their own realm. I'm going to go and look up that girl that spoke up and saying, "Oh, what you just said doesn't matter." And I was starting to talk about growing your crypto, but I could have talked about multiple different things, and they just didn't allow me to. So I was painting the picture of owning your own keys, teaching people to take their money off of exchanges, and how could you grow it without lending it out to other people. Already. Yeah, I was I was going to talk about things that they were already talking about with immaturity of people's minds holding Bitcoin and bringing it to places that they shouldn't. God, these damn limitations. I fucking hate it when people ghost other people or whatever it is, shadow them or whatever. Allow people to say what they want to say. You allowed some fuckers to get in there and talk shit about other people's jobs when they're like a trader. You allowed a trader to talk shit about somebody who's a creator. That was like an hour of my time wasted. I mean, I was doing other things, but So I need to take this screen off. And I need to go to Twitter and write that stupid bitch that responded. Where are you, pathetic? You would be in the recording. I need to run back the recording. Oh, I had her name and everything. All right, I'm going to do this off screen. So that's my failure end of stream. Goodbye. If you have any suggestions on how all this could be better, let me know. Acquire Hex, stake Hex, into the future. We are winning. People don't realize it. 100% uptime sits on the Ethereum blockchain. The Hex contract allows you to earn interest while you hold possession of your keys. You interact one-to-one with the contract. Why is it better than Bitcoin? It's a better store of value. It's a time deposit system where you can see everything in the future, where people set out their stakes. Each stake stands alone, to where, like, if you have to cancel, you only cancel one stake at a time. You do get penalized. Those penalties go to people who stayed honest in the system. Bitcoin was meant to be a peer-to-peer cash, and it is not. And so a Bitcoin maxi realized after a while that Bitcoin has its flaws, and he created the time deposits on the Ethereum blockchain in order for you to interact with that, and as a good store of value. Bitcoin itself is volatile. There's a lot of arguments inside of these concepts that I'm talking about. And on top of that, people are not educated throughout their life in finance. Instead, the government wants you to stay stupid to finance. And systems of government. Until, of course, they want to, yeah, you know what's going on. Hey, make sure that you have plenty of zinc and everything else that makes zinc work in your body. And while it's hot up here in the northern hemisphere, go ahead and put a lot of potassium in your body as well. I think it's potassium glutamate that I'm using. Oh gosh, it's something. All right. Cheers, y'all. Go.hex.com, hex.com, richardhart.com.